We'll do a review in Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yutes. This is the fourth Sikh of the Parshas Devarim. Those that are learning the order of the Sichos in the project Lekutei Sichos, so the first Sikh of this week was Chelek, was Sikh Daled of Devarim. It exactly addresses the same issue in the Sikh over there. Over there, it has a different discussion in Rashi, and to show how Rashi is different than the Medrash. Over there, it's mainly a Rashi Sikha. But over here, the Rebbe raises one of the questions that was brought down the Sikha. This Sikha is from Tafshin Chavtes, or an earlier year the Rebbe said the Sikha. The other Sikha, the Rebbe said in Tafshin Lamed Vav. But one of the issues that were brought down in that Sikha is actually the same that we're discussing in this one as well. The Rebbe asks, over here, the main, in this Sikha, the Rebbe mentioned it before too, but the Rebbe asks, what is the benefit of Moshe Rabbeinu giving the Yidden a limited bracha when he says, Yosef Hashem Elokecha B'seichem, Yosef Aleichem Kochem Ele Pa'amim, if after that he has to say, Vivarech Eschem Kasher Diber Lachem, which means an endless bracha. So if the Eibusher is giving them an endless bracha, why do we need 1,000 times when it's endless? The Rebbe explains that actually there is something very substantial in the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, in the limit. There is an advantage to the connection from Gavul and Bli Gvul. In other words, getting the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu in a way of Gavul, and then adding to that to the union of Bli Gvul. Just like in the bracha itself, we say that Hashem's bracha, Yosef Hashem Aleichem, is Toisfosei Meruba Ala Iker. That Hashem's addition is Yosefa, is more than the main. So if it's more than the main, so why is the main called the Iker? Rabbi explains that the Yidden, through their Avodah Mugbelis, they are the ones that are starting off and bringing out the connection through their mitzvahs in a Mugbal way, and then they add to it the Hoysofah, because that is later on, that is an addition to the idea of Bli Gvul. As the Rebbe will explain it less in the Sikha, let's look inside. From Posik Hashem Elokecha B'seichem Yosef Aleichem Kochem Elef Pa'amim. So the Posik says that Moshe Rabbeinu is blessing the Yidden and saying to them that Hashem, the God of your father, should add onto your numbers that you have now, Kochem, as such, Elef Pa'amim, 1,000 times as much. And he will bless you, he says further, as he had spoken to you. So state in Medrash, says in the Medrash, and Rashi brings it also down in the Pasuk, on the Pasuk, Amrle Yisrael, Rabbeinu Moshe, Yidden were saying, based to Moshe, our master Moshe, our teacher Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo nosan kitzva lebirchesenu. Hashem has not put a limit to our blessing. Ba'ato Marta, you say, Elef Pa'amim, 1,000 times. Amar lahem, so Moshe Rabbeinu answered them, Mashe berachti eschem mishali berachti. That which I have blessed you, that was mine, for myself. I said 1,000. Sheyove HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yivarech eschem kasher diber lachem. But when Hashem comes, He will bless you as He had spoken to you, which is a bracha, but has no limitation. So Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them a limited bracha, a kitzvah, and he's saying to them that Hashem will give him the infinite, the limitless bracha. So as you do the kasha, so the question is known in them about this. Vibal that Eibishter bench mit zayin bracha. Since Hashem blesses with His blessing that has no limitation, it doesn't have an amount, isn't a set amount. Was geht dann zu the bracha for Moshe? So what does the blessing of Moshe add to it? He says Yosef Gomer Elapamim, 1,000 times. So we're talking that they have a blessing of infinite. So what does it add to say that Hashem should give them 1,000 times? But that is included in the, and it's subjugated. There's no value next to the great infinite blessing. This is, of course, from the fact that in 200 we also have 100. So if in 200 we have 100, so in God's unlimited blessing, the blessing of kitzvah of 1,000 for sure included. So why do we need the bracha of 1,000 when we have ein kitzvah without a limit? The Mefarshim answer. So some Mefarshim answer as their oiftu from Birchas Moshe, that what is the novelty that Moshe gives them is in them consists of the fact because Birchas HaKodesh Baruch Hu is nor dam v'niden zayin mekayim Torah mitzvos. That the blessing of Hashem is only when Yidden fulfill Torah mitzvos. So it's conditional on the Yiddens for doing Torah mitzvos. Masha'en kein Birchas Moshe is nitolin kein tonight, as opposed to the blessing of Moshe doesn't depend on any condition. So it turns out that there is value to Moshe Rabbeinu's blessing, because in order to get the unlimited blessing, they need to be observing Torah mitzvahs. But in order to get the 1,000 time the Moshe's blessing, for that they don't have to be. It's not conditional on Mekayim and Torah mitzvahs. Und das is masim. This interpretation fits with them was the Gemara Zokte from Pasuk. The Gemara, this fits with the Gemara. The Gemara says on the verse, "V'hoya mispar b'nei Yisrael," so that the number of b'nei Yisrael goimer asher lo yimed v'lo yisofer, that you cannot measure, not count. Seems to be the Gemara says a contradiction from the beginning to the end. You start off, you say the number of the b'nei Yisrael will be, and they say there will be no number. So how do we reconcile? The Gemara answers that it depends. Here, when we say that you cannot, that the number will be, is when the Yidden do the will of the Eibishter, and Khan, and here, and so over there, they have an unlimited amount of blessing. Lo yimad v'lo yisofer. But when it says v'hoya mispar, limited, is when they don't do Ratzon Shel Mokem. They don't do Hashem's will, and still they have the bracha v'hoya mispar. There's going to be a large number. There's haste as a bracha b'kitzvah mispar, that a blessing with a measure, a number, is doa fil bizman she'noisim Ratzon Shel Mokem. That exists even when they don't do the will of Hashem. Aber the bracha for HaKadosh Baruch Hu was his belikitzvah, but Hashem's blessing that has no limit. Lo yisofer yishayich nor bizman she'yisrael lo yisrael Ratzon Shel Mokem, that only applies when the Yidden do the will of Hashem. So, based on this Gemara, they want to answer that is why Moshe Rabbeinu's blessing is needed. So, because that would apply when there ain't Eisim Ritzon Shel Mokem, and then the Eibishter's bracha is only when Eisim Ritzon Shel Mokem. So that fits with that. There's another answer of the B'Eifen Achar, which would fit with a medrash, that Birchas Moshe is Bizman Hazeh, that Moshe's blessing is in now times. That's a limited blessing, Birchas HaKodesh Baruch Hu, V'zayin Lo Asid Loveh. The blessing of Kodesh Baruch Hu will be in the future to come. That also we have a similar distinction between an unlimited bad blessing and a limited blessing. That the limited blessings is nowadays, the unlimited blessings is in the future to come. But this fits with what it says in the Medrash. That in this world we have a number, there is a number to the Yidden. But in the future to come, the Yisrael will be like the sand of the sea. You cannot measure, you cannot count. So these answers seem to make distinctions between when there is the bracha of Moshe And when there's the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When there is the bracha of a limited bracha, and when there is an unlimited bracha. When they're Makayim mitzvahs, or Bizman Hazeh, or Olam HaLosid is unlimited. When they're not Makayim mitzvah, or Bizman Hazeh, it's limited. But the Rebbe says it's mashma from the Medrash that these brachas come at the same time in the Lashon HaMedrash recorded. Not that there's different times. But from Lashon HaMedrash, no, but from the language of the Medrash here, in our parsha is mashma. It seems from that as the chilik zwischen the zwei brachas b'shtei blois in them, that the only difference between the blessings, it's not they're in different times, different situations. The only difference is was eine is mishali, that one is from mine, which is the Eibush to bless them with an unlimited blessing. When the zwei Moshe Rabbeinu blesses them a limited blessing. When the zweite is Mishallah Kodesh Baruch, when the other blessing comes from Hashem, which is unlimited. Aber beide seinen Faran in demselben Zman, but they're both take place at the same time. Das heißt, it means as euch, wenn es ist da Brichas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shein lo kitzvah, that even when there is the time that ein lo kitzvah, Hashem's blessing, at the same time is Faran or Faran Oifto, Brichas Moshe sheyesh lam kitzvah. There is room, there is place, there is value and benefit to the bracha of Moshe that has a kitzvah. So, in the Lashon of the Medrash, that is mashma. This way, not with the distinction as brought down by the other answers. But furthermore, as the Rebbe pointed this out also in the previous Sikha Nochmer, Azoi ich is muchrach von Stimas Pirush Rashi. So we also have to say, from Rashi's language, which doesn't, plain language, doesn't make any distinction, was bring Losh na Medrash on Kain Hisofas beer in them. He brings the language of the Medrash without adding any explanation into it. Is the fun is verstandig ados pshutish lamikra. So this we also understand that this is the simple meaning of the verse. Und das ist euch masim mit pshutish shel hamikra. And saying this, that in unlimited is also limited, that fits with the simple meaning of the pasuk, and that the Gemara explains. But in the simple meaning of the pasuk, what does it mean? V'hoya mispar b'nei Yisrael. There will be the number of b'nei Yisrael goymer asher lo yimad v'lo yisofer. That number will be a non-counting number. But the pshat is, as es retzich don nit wegen basundere zmanim. Over here, it doesn't talk about the pasuk about different times. Not as is ved zayin mispar b'nei Yisrael. There will be the number of b'nei Yisrael in demselben Zman, the number of the b'nei Yisrael, when it will be fulfilled, the bracha from lo yimad v'lo yisofer, that it will not be measured and not counted. Still, both of them will take place in the same time. So the Rebbe brings down a similar question we have actually in the bracha of Yosef Hashem Aleichem Kochem Toshvosei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Meruba Laiker. That while we're talking about the Hoisof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and still we're saying that it's Meruba Aloiker. That the Iker remains, the limited remains the Iker, and then we have a Tesefis. Let's look inside, base. Similar to this above concept as the bracha mugbelos from Moshe Rabbeinu, that the limited blessing of Moshe Rabbeinu, that is but legabe brichas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, does not become nullified next to the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means even while we have the B'li, we still have the Elef Pamim Kocha from Moshe Rabbeinu. Gefit man euch in der Birchas Hashem goimer Yisrael as leichem goimer gufa. So in this blessing that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Yosef Aleichem Goimer Gufa, over there we find that idea that the limited blessing of Moshe does not become negated, does not become nullified in the greater blessing. According to the interpretation of the Medrash, Yosef Aleichem Kochem. He says Yosef Aleichem. Why does he not say Yivarich Eschem Kochem? What is Yosef Aleichem Kochem? Lama Birchom Belashen Toisfos Efes. Why did he bring them addition? Shetosefos Shalakadosh Baruch Hu. You say them in Eiker because when Hashem, an addition of Hashem is more than the main. So saying that may Hashem add, that addition of Hashem is more than the main, more than the principle. It's addition, no, that is a greater blessing. And there are several of the Medrash brings several examples. But it's similar, it's not understood. Is Yisayrim in Iker, since the additional blessing of Kadosh Baruch Hu is more than the Iker, saying it's more than the main. So why is the Eibishter's bracha called extra when that is the Iker should be? How come the Torah, which is true, refers to, calls the previous, the bracha Iker, legabe dim tesefes, measured next to this addition? Why is this called addition? It would have seemed that Zayin dik Winsker von der Tesefes shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since the main is less than the addition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, verdos noch dem an inyan futofos. So later on, after we get the addition, that becomes an inyan futofos, nitiker, becomes secondary, not the main. Why are we still calling it the Eibishter's Blocha on an addition to the main? But it's no longer the main because the greater blessing is from Hashem, and that's less than that. Why we call that the main? Is the fun gufa de Chocha. So from this itself is the proof. It's evident as Chosh Tzvotzer Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yisayrim in Eiker. Although Hashem's addition is more than the main, Vert Ober das Friedrich and bottle, but still the previous does not become nullified. And furthermore, as Vert angerufen Iker, the Gabe Tzvotzer Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we call it the main relative to the addition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's still called the main. So not only does it not get negated, but it's the main next to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu, that limited, and the blessing of Moshe Rabbeinu is the main over the greater and unlimited blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Gimel. That does verstehen behagdim atoyses biur in the mountain Chazal. So we will understand it by first adding an additional explanation of the above mentioned saying of our sage blessed memory. Quoted the Gemara as Kan lo yimud lo yisov over here when it says you will not be able to measure or count his manashis is when the Yidden do the will of Hashem. But Kan, when do they get the blessing unlimited from Moshe Rabbeinu, or Hoya Mispar number is Bisman Shiraisim Shamokim, when they don't do the will of Hashem? What does it really mean, doing the will of Hashem and not doing the will of Hashem? Of course, even to receive any blessing, a Yid has to work for it. There's a difference is to do the will of Hashem is in a higher, unlimited way. Generally, when we say a blessing, it only comes through the work of a Yid. So therefore, it's understood as even the limited blessing. That's saying the Mispar B'nai Yisrael will be, which is a limited blessing. Which is similar, blessing of Moshe 1,000 times, so it's limited. It still is verbunden mit Avodas B'nai Yisrael. It is associated, it's connected to the service of the Yid. Nor das is an Avodah was in der Feld Shlemis. It's limited, but it's called an Eser Essential Mokim because it's lacking wholesomeness. What is an example for an Avodah, but it's lacking wholesomeness? Let's take, for example, The Rebbe brings the avodah of Cain, who brought a korban for the Eibishter. The Eibishter didn't accept it because he brought from the worst, from the inferior parts. And Hashem didn't accept it. I mean, you can serve Hashem, but it's not complete still when he brings a korban. That's an extreme case. But a person can also serve Hashem, but not fully. That would be called a mispar. That is a work, but it's not the proper work. Nor does an avodah was in your felt shlemis. It's an avodah which is lacking. That means an esim retenishal makom because it's lacking its wholesomeness. These as the evdim ben ongerufen so to the extent that those who do the work they're referred to as ein esim ritzoynoi shel makom. They don't do what Hashem wants. In other words, you're serving Hashem, but you're still not doing that which Hashem wants you to do. That's what we call ein esim ritzoynoi shel makom. Bedugmas Kain. This would be similar. Take for example, Kain was hat gebracht mincha lahavayim. He brought a present to Hashem. Not only did he bring the avodah, but he was the first one. Is when the erster zu bringen. He is the first one to bring. Und erster noch v'hevel hevi gam hu. Also he, in addition to Kain. So Hevel was secondary. So he did avodah. As his over givem in Hagarua, but he brought it from the lesser, from the bad. Didn't give a good korban. In a similar way, but we're not talking to the extent of the korban kain, which was bad. Kimuvan has understood. Is yeder avodah mugbelas. Any time when you serve Hashem in a limited way. Since it is measured and it's a number, and numbered is man durch ir nit oiso mamshich ritzoy noy shel mokem. So we don't make up and we don't draw down Hashem's rots, and the will of us is hecher from Gvul, which is higher than a limitation. These, to the extent that we see these two levels of numbered and higher the number can even be in a very high level. Torah in Taryag, when it's numbered in mitzvahs, that's called a numbered level. That's a mugbal dikei Torah. And then when you have the level of tshuva, which is not limited to the number, because you can do tshuva on them. Besides, we find these two aspects: mispar, numbered, on lo yimid lo yisofer, not measured, not number. In even a higher level. The Alter Rebbe is mevayin avedus Hashem b'shleimuso. The Alter Rebbe explains within serving Hashem in a wholesome way. Mispar means davay debukim mitzvahs. Mispar means when you do mitzvahs, that is itself limited. It's called mispar. The Chazanic mispar taryag chulu, which were given in number. There's a number, exact number, 630 mitzvahs. Mispar taryag. You can't add more and you can't take away. Every mitzvah has its measure, its limitation, how the mitzvah is done. Everything is measured, limited. A service that is limited. That's the level of mitzvahs. That is the service of tshuva. It's a service which is higher than the ishtalshulus in a way that it involves one from the other and limitation, but it's beyond. Higher than the will, higher than limitation. So basically, we're explaining the Gemara we brought down. What does it really mean that it's soynei shel mokem? It's meaning the level of bli gvul, the avodah mugbelas, even from mitzvahs to in a certain level that everything's down, and certainly the avodah when it's not bishlemus, like the avodah by kai, which is an avodah not doing a proper avodah, is not bringing down the level of ligvul. And then you have the avodah of Asunitzona to bring down ligvul. The geretfliya, as said earlier, spoken earlier. So that you have is the Porshter Pirush Bahoya Mispar Goimer Hashem Yomit Lo Yisofar. What does it mean? The number is a number that is not measured or counted. It's not, as the Gemara teaches it, that is two different times. There is a time when there is a mispar, and there is a time when there's lo yimed, but the Pashto Pshat is that the number itself cannot be measured or counted. These are not two different aspects. Nor the mispar alein is an anoifim for lo yimed lo yisofer. The number itself, it's a number that is not measured or counted. The Funish verstandig euch benegeya zu mispar und lo yisofer in avodas Hashem. Understand the as it relates to being able to count it and not count it as it is in the service of Hashem. As euch der Inyan von Mispar, Vahoya Mispar is verbunden mit dem Ilui von Lo Yisofer. That while we're doing limited mitzvahs, those are limited, still they are connected with unlimited, with Lo Yisofer, not counted. Although mitzvahs are a number and limited, is mandur zei euch oisin ritzoyne shel mokem. You actually do the rotzen, you do the infinite, the rotzen Hashem. Mamshich dem rotzen elyon v'sizecher from gvul. You draw down the will of the Supreme, which is higher than limitation. Lo yisofer. Bring down that you can't count, even though you are using limitation, using Torah mitzvahs which are limited. Under Unterschied. So, what is the difference then? If the limited and the unlimited, so we're saying that even the mispar is lo yimad, and then we're saying there's lo yimad when there is actually blivul. So, what's the difference with the Unterschied zwischen the zwei sugya avodah? So, what's the difference between avodah mugbelas, which is Oyser Tzene Shemokim and not Oyser Tzene Shemokim, which you're saying that in the Avodah Mugbelas, we are also the limited Avodah, we bring down the Bligvul. So what's the Unterschied, the difference? Zwischen the zwei Suga Avodas in them, consistentness. Was in mitzvahs is dem Shochas, the Amshochas of Bligvul, the Meir Begilu. Talked about the difference between Shuvah and mitzvahs. So in mitzvahs, the way the Bligvul is drawn down, it does not shine openly. About the avodah begilu is nitinan inyan for l'mayla bagbola. Since the service, what do we see? Working in a limited fashion, mitzvahs is limited. So therefore, since the avodah is nitinan for l'mayla bagbola, it's not beyond lutesh mashenken avodah hatshuva. As opposed to the service of tshuva, was is begilui mitzadem odom ovid, which then it's openly because you see the person that services Hashem, he serves Hashem in an unlimited way, an avodah shelemaylam hagbola, a service which is beyond limitation. Is dort begilui der inyan for lo yumed v'lo yisofer. So over there is openly that level of not measured and not counted. The beginning them. Explain this. Mitzvahs seinen the Ritzoyne shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mitzvahs are God's will. Punkt wie der Eibeshter is believable, just like Hashem is unlimited. Azoi is Ritzoyne believable. Also Hashem's wishes. A mitzvah which Hashem wants us to do, that's an unlimited. It's an unlimited wish. It's a wish from Hashem which is unlimited. The far ver durch mitzvahs nimshach ritzoyne yisbarach, and that's why anytime we do a mitzvah, we get Hashem's will. It says bligvul, that's unlimited. Lo yisofer, cannot be counted. So why is there a limit? in the mitzvahs. And thus was the mitzvah seinen the medida vagabol. Why are mitzvahs limited and measured and limited? He says nit came medida bachutz. Doesn't mean that it's measured like from the outside. Somebody is limiting and measuring and not allowing for the full to come. It's an inherent inside measurement to come about, to manifest itself in the limited, and therefore that's not really a limitation. It says need medida mibachutz. It's not measured. Some from the outside limiting it in the in the godly light which extend through mitzvahs. Not that but Hashem himself, so to speak, limited, measured himself as the hamshachas harotzin ein sofi. That the when you're coming down, this endless will of Hashem's will nimshach werden dafke, that should extend specifically when you do such and such of a limited action. And furthermore, doing a physical action as alvenin and an oifum medida, that rotzit should become in a way measured as the pe'ula zolas keren oifnemen, so that the act is able to accept it. Kli v'oir. There should be the light of Hashem, nimshach, and the vessel to accept and receive that light. So that is Hashem himself has limited himself to come down in a limited way through a limited action into a limited set of physical pu'ulas actions we do. In a level, the light into the oil into the cave, into the vessel. Since this is not a measure from something which is outside of him, God forbid that somebody is limiting Hashem's light. But this is which the Ein Sof is himself measuring and limiting himself. As the language of Chassidus, Medida v'Hagbola Atzmis. It's a essence of measure and limitation. Is those be'emes nika ken Hagbola. So in truth, this is not really a limitation. Leidoch. On the other hand, Musban Habun the Hagbola. So while we're saying it's not really a limit because it comes from Hashem, but we need that limitation. But in the Welt is the Chametzius Mugbeles. The world is a entity which is limited. Which is not able to accept, receive the godly light that is infinite. We're not a limit. But then, because then it would become negated, non-existent. And since the service of Torah mitzvahs is associated, tied with the existence of the world, that's why we need that measure and limitation of the mitzvahs. And thus meant, this explains what it means. The number will be that is not measured, not counted. As the mitzvah, mispar fun mitzvahs, that the number of mitzvahs, the counting, the limitation mitzvahs, is nit kein MSM medida, it's not really a measurement. In them extends, and through them extends, their blig will suffer. The unlimited of not counted comes through those limitations. So, in this case, it turns out that the Veda of Torah mitzvahs are actually a limited within the limits of the numbers in Torah mitzvahs, but they bring down the limitless of Hashem. So why is this such? Why does Hashem have this limitation? And to bring down the infinite through the limitation, through the limitation itself, why not have a limitless world to accept the limitless of the Ratzon of Hashem? But that's what we understand. Hey, bald as the Tachlis of Mitzvahs is to mamshich zayin dem eireliki vasot nit king vul, since the ultimate goal of the mitzvahs is to draw down a godly light which has no limitation. So why did Hashem do such? As the Avodah soll sein verbunden davke mit der Welt, that this service should be tied specifically with the world, was ken nit vernehmen der Oil, that cannot tolerate the light. And es soll davon sein, the medidus von mitzvahs, so that we need the limitations, the measures of mitzvahs, that they are up to tragen, in order to bring down the infinite will of Hashem in a limited world. Is the Birda. Explanation is those was mitzvahs and gegeben geworden lamata b'agbola. The reason why the mitzvahs are given below and in a limitation is as nit mitzadem v'zei muzun nimshach ver lamata. It's not because they have to be come down below. They're saying that what should we do? We need the mitzvahs to come down below, and the below have this lacking, this deficiency, that it has limitations. So we have to bring it down through this mitzvahs, the limited, they bring the unlimited, and you're trying to see why can't we have an unlimited world? No, it's not like that. The reason why it's coming down a limited world, because that's actually ultimately the intention, that it should be not that we should bring down the limitless by itself, but that the unlimited should come through the limited. Because it's not because we are lacking and we needed to come down here into the place of lacking. No, it's actually the advantage to come down in a place of Hagbala Medida. It's not to say that we have we have no choice, so to speak. We cannot accept the light that is infinite. Seiden durch seine Slapshes in der Medida Hagbala of mitzvahs, only when it dresses up in the measure and the limitation of mitzvahs, and therefore we have no choice to bring down the blikvul. We need mitzvahs so that, but just the opposite. Because the ultimate greatness is not in the limitless that cannot be counted for sich independently, just the unlimited. Nor der chibur von gvul blikvul. This is to connect limit with limitless. As mispar gufa zonis alaverin lo yimit lo yisofer, to elevate, to raise, that the number should become lo yimit lo should become blikvul. Tafki in them drikt sich ois der koyach ha'atzmus. In this, you have the expression of the power of the essence of Hashem in the fact to connect the limit with the limitless. That power to connect limitless and not limitless is higher. This is the power of the Atzmus itself, which is higher both from limit and from limitless. So while Hashem can come in the expression in limitations, Hashem can be expressed in lack of limitations. But the ability for Hashem to express himself in limitation and the lack of limitation together at the same time, that comes from a place which is higher than limitation and lack of limitations. But this is the power of the Atzmus itself. Und der Riber kann da sein nur durch die Medida Atzmis von Atzmus in Sobarku. That can only take place through the essence measure of the essence of the blessed Ein Sof. Mitzad oiros v'giluyim, from the perspective of where there is light and revelations, unlimited and limit are two separate aspects. But when we're talking about the atzmus, the essence, that limitation can sein the chibur from gvul and bli gvul, that you can connect limit and unlimited. Mispar shaloyim bli yisov. Example is the Mokum Orneinu Amida. While you counted, and the Torah requires the space of the Oren have a space, and yet when you measured it didn't have a space. As we say that the place of the Oren didn't take up any space. When you measured it from the walls, there was no space. You measured it to one side of the Oren, and you measure from the other side from the wall, and both sides of the Oren, and it turns out that the Oren itself didn't take any space, although the pasuk says that Mokum Ormus Apitoyra Hobun Amedida, but it does have to have a measure. So while it's 2.5 amas, it has to have a measure, and yet it's unlimited, it's not measurable. Das ist euch, was Birchas Moshe wird nicht bottle. This is also why Moshe's blessing does not become negated. Euch noch dem, when der Eberster benched Eden mit der Bracha she'ein lo kitzur, even after Hashem benches Eden with a blessing that has no measure. Well, der Tachlis hakavona, because the ultimate goal is not as old bottle werden der Inyan from Gvul. It's not that the idea of a limitation should become negated, non-existent. But Adarabah, the contrary, as Zozain der Chibur from Gvul and Bligvul, we want to connect. We want it to be Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha. We want to have the kids, and in there we should have the Lamaila. Zozain der Chibur from Gvul and Bligvul. The river is though. Sai Birchas Moshe Yesef Gomer Elapon. That's what we have. Also, the blessing of Moshe 1,000 times was tut oif as the Bria Medida. So Zay Metachas Hashleimus. That accomplishes that the measure, the limitation should be in its ultimate, total awesomeness. Bizas is vertariv von Elapon, so that it becomes 1,000 times. When the Yonoch Shiava Kodesh Baruch Hu, when Hashem comes in this itself, is in them gufa vet nimshu berchosa Kodesh Baruch Hu she'ein lo kitzur, that it has an end in the bracha. Es wird nicht nor a ribui, wie viel es kann sein, mitzad Gidra Bria, that the multitude is not only how much it can be from the perspective of creation, from the limitations and the boundaries of limitation, nor a ribu shein l'kitzur, a ribu that has no limitation. So we need the Yosel Lechem Elapomim. We don't want to take that away. It's not that it's not going to be important. We want to have the chibur of the Bli Gvul in Kshiva Kodesh Baruch Hu, in the limited bracha. And the Rebbe goes away to explain now another thing is an expression that the Rebbe Rashab would say, Nasdira lo yizborech. He added the word yizborech to this particular statement because that explains the level of yizborech, how we can have a dira lo b'tachtonim in such a contrast between boira and nivra, and in the world, bring it down, it comes through the level of yizborech. Let's look inside. Vav. Mit kemem b'bayr zayin. With this, we can explain those was kedushas. Meiri chome admurat gizok, that my father-in-law, the Rebbe said, as I'm foter, kveit kedushas admur marashab nishmos eiden. The Rebbe Rashab reflect lepomim rabbis meisiv zayin in Loshen HaMedrash. So many times he would add to the language of the Medrash, the quoted Medrash, the Sava Kodesh Baruch Hu Liyis Lo Dira B'Tachtonim. The Medrash says Hashem wants to have a dwelling place B'Tachtonim. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said that the Rebbe Shabbos said that many times it would say Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu Liyis Lo Yisborich. He added the word Yisborich, blessed. Liyis Lo Yisborich. The blessed Hashem should have a Dira B'Tachtonim. Why specifically? It's nice to branch Hashem, to say Yisborich, fine. But why in this Mamre Chazal specifically add the word Yisborich? Because the Rebbe will explain we need the Yisborich. The Chayre seems needs an explanation. As when let it be true that when you mention the name of Hashem, we need to praise Him. We don't find that when one repeats a language of sayings of our sages of blessed memory, in which the Hashem's name is mentioned, so our holy teachers, our leaders, the Rebbes, they should add the word Yisborach, so they add the word blessed or similar. So therefore we have to say, as a Siddur Kesher v'Shaychus Miyuchedes, that there is a connection, there is a tie, a special connection. Tzudishan dem inyan for Yisborach, the idea of blessed, mit inyan for Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu, liyus leidir b'tachtonim. With this, that we're saying that Hashem desired to have a dir b'tachtonim. So, so we can say the explanation that inyan from dira b'tachtonim, when we say a dwelling place in the worlds below, is koilel beis kitzavos. That includes two extremes. On one hand, we're saying dira. We're saying a dwelling place is aloshon v'zvais. That's a language that points as though vert nimshach atzmusi umusi is borich habilti bagvul. That here, what we're bringing down is Hashem's essence and who He is, unlimited, because this is a dwelling place. This would be similar to a dwelling place below, in which was in which the person with his whole being finds himself. So on one hand we say dira, a dwelling place. A dwelling means that Hashem actually Himself should live. Where are you doing the dira place? B'tachtonim. What means b'tachtonim meant? This is this low world. There is nothing lower than this. This is the ultimate limitation. Undira. So we have the lowest total limitation, and then a dwelling place, the Hebrew from Belikvul. So the statement, what it says, is you're connecting Dira betachtoinim Belikvul, the Atzmus, with Gvul. Vi kennen tachtoinim Gvul werden. Adira lo yizborich. Sasmus yizborich habilti bagvul. How could limited, lower entities become a dwelling place to the blessed Atzmus, who is infinite, who is not limited? Und doch bleiben im Mitzvusum, and yet they remain in their existence. They become the Dira. Is there being them the Sof Mchakat Mur Marashab Nishmosei? So the explanation is the addition that the Rebbe Rashab adds, Nishmosei Yizborech. That inyan von Dira loy vet musbar durch den Teuchen inyan for Yizborech Bracha. This idea to make a Dira for Hashem is explained through the idea of Yizborech Bracha. Zayin. So what is a Bracha? A Bracha is the Hamshocha to bring down from the highest level to the lowest level. That's why he added over here the Bracha, the words of Yizborech. The Chelek zwischen Bracha and Tefillah is, what's the difference between a blessing and a prayer? Bracha is mamshich dozvos as is do in sheirush mocha. Bracha draws down that which already exists in the root and in the source. Mashenken Tefillah to toif arotzen chodesh. Tefillah accomplishes a new yirot. A new aspect that does not exist in the root and in the source. In the source. Thus is ober, this difference between bracha and tefillah applies to a human being. Is norman negeya, brichas basav adam. It's only as it relates to the blessing of a human being of flesh and blood. As opposed to when we talk about the blessing of Hashem. The Baal der Eibishter is doch nicht gebunden chas v'sholem. B'didas v'agbolus von Shoyrish HaNivra HaMizborech. Since Hashem is not bound, God forbid, with the limitations, the measurement limitations of the root of the Creator that is blessed, the Eibishter's blessing is not confined, is not tied to the root, to the place of the source of the bracha. Hashem's blessing also has the advantage of tefillah. It can also accomplish something new, not only to bring down from the source, but bring down something new. Which is higher than the root and the source of the created being. Thus haste. What does this mean? As in Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zayin Dov Beidik Tzavos. So this means that when everything is a blessing, we have these two extremes. See, the light Hecher from Shoyrish HaMokar HaNivra, it can touch, it reaches higher than the root and the source of the Nivra, doesn't have the limitation of the Mokar. Hecher von Ishtalshlus, beyond the level of Ishtalshlus. Bring the sarop, but it brings it down brocha v'amshocha, it brings down from both to below. As von Hecher von Ishtalshlus, that from higher than Ishtalshlus, it comes down, it extends, it's drawn down to the created being in Ishtalshlus. Thus is the beer in the Yisofa. This explains the addition of Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyasloi Yizborich, the blessed Hashem to make a difference. Those was tachtonim can never nadirloi. The fact that those who are lower are able to become a dwelling place for Him, latzmusoi, that musberch to them inyan for berchos shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is God's blessing. V'stutav Yizborich. God is blesses. He is mamshich from the mile for seder shtalshlus to seder shtalshlus. That draws down from beyond shtalshlus to shtalshlus. That's why we can connect the Lamailo Mikvah into Agbola, because it's the concept of Yisborach Abraham. Es bleibt noch als nicht verstandig. Ches. It's still not understood. Because here we have to bring down from a place which is higher than limitation. How does the avodah of a yid have the power to bring from the higher of limitation? Bleibt noch halt nicht verstanden. Weil der Chibur von Gvul und Bligvul is nor b'koich shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who can connect limit and unlimitedness? Is only the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's his zacher from Zebeda? Because Hashem is higher than Gvul and Bligvul. Why is this tied to the service of a created being? Since it is a limited service, that should only have in of itself the power to draw down a limited light. How could it reach a power which is beyond the limit and unlimited? Is the being them we cannot come upon him, so the explanation has spoken many times. The Eibishter's Rotzen is, Hashem's will is, as the Giluyim, Shalamaylo, that these revelations that come from above, so technically Hashem should give it to us. But the Eibishter's don't need kumin and ha'ifum from Hamadi Chisufa. Hashem doesn't want it to come to us in a shameful bread. Therefore, all things that are drawn down, was einen Hecher von Geder and Evroim, also those that are beyond the boundaries of the created beings, Barbundun and Toldibai and Avodah Sodom, they are tied and they hinge on the service of man. On the river, and therefore, Agam as der Dira Lo Yisborach B'tachtoin, even though that this dwelling place to Hashem in the lower world, comes from above in a way of a gift. So, which means we can't really reach there. It's higher than the reach of the Avodah Sodom. That part, as we said, the love. If you don't give him a matone, he had to do something for them. So even though what you're giving is a matone and not a pay, but the matone is also given because you've done something for him. That muzayin the ovid lenayich lenafshe from the mnois matone, from the one who gives matone. You must have done something for the. So when the Eibshter gives you a gift, only then he gives you a gift. A person doesn't go around giving gifts to people who have no connection with them. So you got to do something for him that he wants to give you the gift. It says, first, it needs to be the wholesomeness of the service from the perspective of the created being. And only then extends to them from above the root of created being. But this is euch the hasbor in the minyan from Birchas Kahanim. This is also the idea. What is the Kahanim benching? The Eibshter can bench them. Why does he need the Kahanim to bench them? But once they do their part, then the Eibshter rest. That's the Neichel and Afshe. This is euch the hasbor in the minyan from Birchas Kahanim. This also explains the lesson Kahanim. Was they benching Eden b'shluchus shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu? They're benching Eden as agents of Hashem. A bracha was his hecher for ishtalshlus, with a blessing which is beyond the ishtalshlus. L'chayre v'bal der Eibshter will mention Eden. Seemingly, if Hashem wants to bless the Eden, if Avos darf sein durch the Kahanim, why does it have to come through the Kahanim? As they don't mention Eden b'koach shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they should bench Eden with the power of Hashem. The Eibshter can doch say bench. Hashem can bless him directly. But the Indian is canal. The idea is like we said before. The Kavon El Yoina is that the intent of the Supreme is as euch die Broches, the Amshoches, sein Hechef and Ishtalshlus, that also those blessings that are higher and above Ishtalshlus, darfun nimshach werden durch Avodah Sa'odam durch the Tachtonim, need to be drawn down through the work of the person, through the Tachtonim. Yes. Apizei is move on. So now we understand. And although we have the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is aber dur berchos shel Moshe. So we have the question we had before: why do we need Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha when we have the bracha of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu? But through the bracha of Moshe, was brings shleimus and Devarim. He brings the wholesome creation, Yisrael Kechem Elef Pamim. But the Shleimus Kaviyachol, this also brings around about the wholesomeness, so to speak, in Bechos Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu She'ein Lekitzvah. This brings the wholesomeness that the blessing of Hashem has no limit. How? There shouldn't be shameful bread. So we've done everything that we could. So this brings in Shleimus and the Hashem's bracha. This is also the specific language. God's addition, which is more than the main. Since the lower ones are drawing down this addition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through their service, we're bringing it down at the end of the day. That's what we're called the main, because we're the ones that bring it down. Because we're the main, and we're the reason why the Teisfosei, the addition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comes down. The Yid has to do his avodah, the Neichel and Afshe, the Shleimus. Bracha through Moshe Rabbeinu, the Birchas Kahanim, and then the Eibishter brings his Tosafos through that. Yud. Kol Hanal is Oichdi Inyonim Ufloim V'Spirish Rashi. All the above is also these wondrous matters that we find in Rashi. Was bring Toichen HaSifri VaMedrash Abu, who brings down the contents of the Sifri and the Medrash who brought down. Was it Pshutei Shal Pirush Rashi. This is the simple of Rashi. Pshutei Shal Mikra. Rashi zogt. Rashi says that B'chos Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Dom meant. Rashi said of there it says Kichovim and Cholayom. Rashi says that what is the bracha over here that were made that the Eibishter Yivarech Eschem made man davtocha shevyuchel ish l'mayim v'goyim. Anybody can count that mit verbinter es mit mi mono davke. Who can count? So Rashi said this is the bracha of who can count was when is those. When is the bracha? When is the time who can count? Is Kipirush Rashi Kitargumoy. Rashi says it's Kitargumoy. Muzmane is when Asidin Targum says the Yachsinun. The Pashas Bolok when it says of the Mimona Afar Yaakov. Then the time is when Asidin the Yachsinun Alma when they will inherit the land. This is lost in Lovely. So that's the time of the Mimona. That's the time who will count, and this is directly connected to the time of the future to come. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach Toshin Chavtes.